Sometimes, exploring means some history, some mystery, and some ice, making things slippery. I'm author and researcher Mike Luoma. Visiting historic Redemption Rock in Princeton, Massachusetts also led me to a nearby stone chamber and some intriguing stone-lined waterworks. Redemption Rock has an interesting history. One of our most brutal and bloodiest wars happened right around here in the mid-1670s, as King Philip's War saw New England's indigenous peoples violently push back against English colonists, forcing them from their territories and taking their land. We don't hear much about this war. I grew up in the area, and it wasn't really covered. We went from the Pilgrims' Landing in 1620 to the American Revolution in 1776. Turns out a lot happened in the 150 years between. In 1676, this was the frontier, out near Wachusett, base of King Philip, known to his people as Metacom. Metacom, a Wampanoag leader, was the son of Massasoit, who had aided the Pilgrims. But Metacom saw the sons of the Pilgrims breaking their father's promises, taking more and more land. Disagreements turned into conflicts and then into a war, with indigenous peoples raiding and reclaiming frontier settlements, and colonists wreaking their own savagery upon those they labeled savages in turn. Mary Rowlandson, wife of a Puritan minister, was taken captive in a raid on Lancaster in early February 1676. Her ransom paid, she was redeemed here at the beginning of May 1676. Her return is commemorated here, etched into the rock. Upon this rock, May 2nd, 1676, was made the agreement for the ransom of Mrs. Mary Rowlandson of Lancaster between the Indians and John Hoare of Concord. King Philip was with the Indians, but refused his consent. Mary Rowlandson later wrote a book about her captivity. It became the equivalent of a 17th century bestseller. It's an imposing outcrop, an impressive bit of ledge, especially from this side. And, chosen for this captive exchange, this stone was likely important, significant to local indigenous folks well before it became Redemption Rock. A trip around the stone reveals almost aquatic embellishments. Were these stones added to suggest fins? Or perhaps this was an attendant porpoise? Even around the back of the ledge, at its lowest profile, it suggests a long aquatic form, which is reinforced by the placement of the boulder fin on the top. Interesting embellishments, and likely ancient and indigenous. The rocks and stones were important to local indigenous peoples. Many large boulders bear Indian names like Sleeping Rock. Several boulders in central Massachusetts are named King Philip's Rock and are said to be Metacom's meeting places. One in Berlin, one in Sharon, and one in Winchendon, to name 3. The stones were important to local indigenous folks and significant. Places where you conducted important business, treaties, or exchanges, for example. The Mid-State Trail and a few other hiking trails crisscross the land around Redemption Rock. I'd heard from someone at Fruitland's Museum of a rock shelter nearby. This was my first chance to investigate since that summertime conversation. But instead of a rock shelter, I found a stone chamber on the other side of a small creek. I'm going to assume this is what they meant, as I never did find a rock shelter. There's graffiti, and this chamber has definitely seen some use over the years. But how many years? There are a few signs here which make me think this could be a pretty old stone chamber. It's not laid out in flat courses. In other words, the stones don't sit row upon row like bricks, but instead fit together more organically. Flatter coursework is a sign of later construction, and this appears older. The steps down and in are a feature I haven't seen in a stone chamber before, and might rule out use as a root cellar, as those aren't known for having steps usually. There is mortar between the stones, which can be a sign of later construction, but in this case, the mortar appears to have been added long after construction. It's not foundational, and certainly not pointed in. It may have been a later attempt to weatherproof the space. This stone chamber had some interesting features. When I checked for solar alignments, I might have found two more. Though hard to say for certain now, with trees in the way, there is an intersection with the winter solstice sunrise and the ridge beyond the creek, just about where Redemption Rock lies from here. There's also an equinox sunrise over that same ridge a little further east. Fascinating. The front seemed awfully wide open. Given that the steps down and in are narrow and centered, I wondered if there once was a wooden front on this chamber with a door in the middle. There also seems to be a wooden floor, at least at the back of the chamber, or perhaps a hatch. Gentle stomping gave a hollow sound and a musty, moldy odor. Leaving the chamber to take a look at the mound it's built into, I noticed that creek was actually more of a stone-lined canal. This appears to be a waterwork which guides the flow around the chamber and into a beaver pond just beyond. Note the rows of stone running down into the water. There were some interesting stones around the chamber mound. I thought there might be a summer solstice sunrise alignment here, but there were too many trees in between to see the ridge once again. What an intriguing stone chamber. A little mystery and a little history, too, on this visit to Princeton, Massachusetts. I'm Mike Luoma. Thank you for experiencing Redemption Rock and the Stone Chamber with me.